It's the first panel of the day, and I really encourage you again to use the opportunity to ask questions and to network amongst yourselves. We're talking about introducing SMEs and startups to the quantum world, and we have a fantastic set of speakers which will be moderated by Philip Zupancic. He's the data science consultant and a quantum developer at Accenture, and what's special is that he knows both academia and the business world. He's holding a PhD in quantum physics at the ETH Zurich, and also knows the business world as he's developing and implementing real-life use cases for quantum optimization algorithms. So feel free to ask questions, use our hashtag Quantum Summit 21, and the stage is yours. Have fun on our first panel of day 2.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this panel. I hope you all had a very interesting first day of the Quantum Summit. When looking at the quantum landscape from far above, it's easy to give credit to big companies like Google or IBM for their endeavors with large-scale general-purpose quantum computers. But just as important are startups and SMEs that push innovation, that generate value for their clients, or that are an essential part of the quantum supply chain. And that's what this panel is about. We will talk about the opportunities and challenges for today's SMEs and startups in quantum technology, and we will talk about how to get more companies involved in that. And I'm very happy to have a panel of experienced entrepreneurs to talk to today. In this panel are Damian Boeselager, who originally worked in the private sector before founding a progressive pan-European party, Volt Germany. And he has been a member of the European Parliament since 2019, where, among other things, he's working on innovation and digitalization topics. I will talk to Dr. Jan Goetz, who has a PhD in quantum computing from TU Munich. He worked as a postdoc in Aalto University in Finland, where he founded his company IQM, where he develops application-specific quantum hardware, and you just had the opportunity to listen to his talk. After founding his company, he returned to Munich, where part of his company is located now. I will also talk to Dr. Andrew Horsley, who also has a background in quantum science. He has a PhD from Basel University in Switzerland. He is the CEO and co-founder of Quantum Brilliance, where they are building small-scale room temperature quantum computers based on NV centers. Next, there's Dr. Alexander Regnat, who studied at TU Munich, where he founded Cutra. They manufacture cooling devices for cryogenic temperatures that only require electric power. And last but not least, there is Johannes Verst, who also just gave his talk in this channel. He has a background in quantum physics. He was a self-employed innovation consultant and company manager, and he founded the Quantum Business Network, QBN, where he's bringing together companies and we're supporting the quantum tech industry. So a warm welcome to all of you. I'm very happy to talk to you today. Since we have limited time, let's jump right into it. Jan, let me start with you. At IQM, you work on ASICs. What is the added value for your clients, and why did the big companies not take this route?
I tried to explain this earlier, so that what we try to do with this application-specific approach is really to create a shortcut. So kind of we gain time for certain applications. But of course, there's nothing like a free lunch. So what we kind of pay for it is that we give up part of the market, because this system then can only address this certain application, and the rest of the, let's say, quantum computing market is not being tackled like this. And this is, for us, this speed, being a startup, speed is very important in this deep tech field, because the timescales, especially in quantum, are still quite long. So each year, so to say, that we can win is very important for us also when we tell our funding story and things like this. So I think this is the trade-off that you have to make, and when you build up your company strategy between, okay, how kind of niche do we want to go, but gain time, and how broad of a market do we want to address? And I think the larger corporates, they just kind of have enough resources to just go the long walk straight ahead. But for us, really kind of being early in the market in selected applications is really important.
Cool. I guess the same is kind of true for you, Andrew. Your company, Quantum Brilliance, develops these small size room temperature quantum computers. And you envision devices that will kind of fit into a computer extension card in a few years. So what is the value and the market for this?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So for us, it's about then creating quantum computers that are just another component of a computing system. And they can be just as powerful as other quantum computers, but because they don't have to have cryogenics or vacuum systems, their size, weight, and power is in a very different form. And so we can have thousands of them deployed and start thinking of them rather than as a replacement for a supercomputer or a comparable to it, as another accelerator card within the arsenal. And so you can have jobs distributed between CPUs, GPUs, and quantum processors, and have them deployed in similar numbers and similar areas. So by the thousands in a supercomputer, or in a car, in a satellite, in a drone, or under your desk. So again, like Jan was saying, it's and I think IQM is actually one of the companies that has done extremely well with a strong commercial focus and set of decisions. It's about marrying that deep tech expertise and scientific basis with a set of commercial decisions around how to target products into areas that then you have unique value, and picking your battles in order to then move fastest into those areas and win through that way.
That is very interesting, and we will talk about like applications for these devices also in a later part of the panel for how to involve more companies into this. Alexander, you the cryogenic cooling is essential for superconducting quantum computing. What does Cutra do differently, and what is the impact for your clients?
Yeah, well, actually, cryogenics, very low temperatures, are a key requirement not only for quantum computing, but even for other verticals in quantum tech, like communication, some sort of sensors, detectors, and so on. What we do differently compared to our competition is that we provide cryogenic cooling independent of the supply with cryogens. So we're focusing on a cooling principle that is based on magnetic refrigeration, which allows us to provide these very low temperatures in a very robust and easy to use way, which allows in the first place to facilitate and accelerate the research of these quantum devices that are now being built. And in the long term, to really integrate these devices with the cooling to implement real world products that can be used apart from the labs. So that's the vision, because cryogenic cooling independent of cryogens can be achieved in a more compact, more cost efficient way compared to cooling with these cryogens. And notably, it doesn't suffer from the limitation with of the supply with limited cryogens like helium-3, for instance.
So basically, it's almost a requirement for scaling up superconducting, quantum computing in the long run.
I think so. If you want to really produce large unit numbers, not only for computing, but also, for instance, for communication purposes, say, that will be a key requirement, yes.
So these three companies, IQM, Quantum Brilliance, and Cutra, they are all members of the quantum business network you founded, Johannes. Why did you start this initiative?
Oh, that's a good question. So I studied physics a long time ago with a focus on quantum technologies, and I saw that it came out of fundamental research, and I saw a quantum winter in front of us. So I saw the necessity to support all the stakeholders and the ecosystem. And I started with HQS as the first member, and I think the second one was Jan with IQM. And now we have 20 members across over the globe. So I'm very happy to work with all of them.
So what is the benefit of being part of the network?
Oh, we have a colorful bunch of activities and services, and yeah, we provide valuable business and networking opportunities. Means doing matchmaking. We have extensive hands-on support, individual support for the startups, and yeah, we have as a key element of our network activity, for example, our working group meetings, where we provide a trust-based environment for knowledge exchange and the initiation of collaboration. And yeah, a lot of more things which are a huge benefit, I think, for all of the stakeholders. Yeah,
that's great. Damian, you have a strong interest in startups, and as a member of the European Parliament, you worked on promoting innovation. Why is this an important topic for you and also for Europe?
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for having me here. It's very kind to invite me because obviously my background, I studied philosophy, and we as philosophers, we're always very afraid of the people who study physics because we know that they can do everything we can do, but we can't do anything that they can do. So I always feel a bit inferior, but thanks a lot for having me on the stage in any case. I mean, my story is the one that I went from the private sector and then thought, okay, we need more, let's say, positive, progressive European politics. And then I joined the European Parliament. And so for me, it was clear that something I think that Johannes said also earlier, that we need more European approaches to to the biggest problems that we see. And for me, one that I see is that we have, very smart minds, as we can see here, but very often we lack funding, we lack talent, actually access to talent, and we face a lot of red tape when we are, small startups. I experienced this with my political startup as well, but I think it's much bigger if you actually want to found companies. And so that's why I got interested in the field. I personally have a preference for, actual innovation, if I can call it like that, and not just, platform software innovations, but technical ones. And so that's why I'm very happy to be here. And I think it's absolutely clear that quantum technology is, if not the biggest next step that we need to do. So thanks a lot also for Johannes to somehow trying to foster that environment.
Thanks, Damian. Now that the stage is set, let's talk about starting up a company in today's quantum landscape. You all are successful entrepreneurs. When founding your companies, what was easy and what were the main challenges for you? Who wants to go first?
Easy was saying, yes, I have a drive and this is what I want to do. And so many challenges. But I think the thing there is that a critical thing is that drive, because if you knew all the challenges in front of you, and people say this when you're at the start of your journey, that you probably wouldn't have started, but you just got to be more optimistic and that I'll be different and it'll all go smooth. It's one of the most rewarding things that I could recommend to anybody. But there's no single challenge that I'd highlight. Just that there's many, and that you need to have that resilience and drive to get past them.
Maybe I can go second. So I think, at least for me, what was easy was somehow getting used to the kind of different way of working in this entrepreneurial world. So I think this is something that suited me well. I think a challenge that we have, especially in quantum, is dealing with these huge uncertainties. Maybe for a quantum physicist, this should be easy because quantum physics is inherently uncertain, but the technology is uncertain. The business model is mainly uncertain. Some people talk about the cloud, some people about selling systems. So I think convincing investors and others that with all of these uncertainties, nevertheless, we will find our way through and have success on the long run. This was in the beginning a challenge. And I think something that I learned here was also just listen to everyone you discuss with and talk to and get their input, and then build somehow a plan around this. So I think something that for everyone is good to have is some kind of attitude to not think that you're the smartest boy in town, but just listen to people who have much more experience, for example, on the business side or other things, and take their input and then shape your story with all of these inputs.
So I think Jan already mentioned it. Of course, financing is a challenge for quantum tech, like any other deep tech, I think. It's not too easy to get this done, but there are many opportunities, and I think we're getting even more opportunities right now, which is a good development. But I can also very much support what Andrew said. So there is a new challenge every day, and of course that's challenging, but that's also a great thing. So that's what I really like about founding a company, that you do something completely different actually every day, and you get to learn many different people. You're speaking to different persons every day, and you're facing these different challenges. So you just have to get used to this, and take the support that is provided by networks like the QPN, but also by the funding agencies and the politics. So I think that quantum tech is a very dynamical field, and it's important to stay up to date, connect with each other, and just move on, particularly due to this uncertainty we're facing. Yes.
Can I ask something about this, Alexander? Because I mean, you say, and also Andrew says that there is, I mean, challenges you have to, tackle every day. I mean, how much of that is actually, red tape, regulatory challenges, issues to try to get visa for your employees? I mean, things that could be, eased from the public sector side.
I think it's both. At least for us in the early stage, as the founders, we're doing also still a lot of hands-on work. So really also in the technical development. So in the night, I'm writing proposals and dealing with VC and financing and so on, regulatory aspects. In the morning, I'm in the lab supporting the tech team. I'm reaching out to customers. So I think what's so challenging is that you're doing in the very beginning, you're doing a lot on your own, and that's bringing in another challenge to find the team, the talents to support you on that journey, and build very quickly the team that is needed to do this job and do it in a very high quality way. I think, at least from my point of view, the regulatory challenges aren't too large. You can deal with that. I know many people are complaining about administrative hurdles, but I think it's not the biggest challenge, to be honest. Yeah, it's rather to get all these tasks done in that short time.
I agree, it's not the biggest challenge, but maybe still one comment in your direction, Damian, that I think what we see is a great value here of the European Union, for example, when it comes to hiring. So getting people which are already within the European Union is straightforward. And we have hired from outside the EU, which is a nightmare because we have to wait 4 months or even longer for the visas. But still, I think we can do better. For example, now we have 2 locations in Finland and Munich, and we cannot use the same working contracts and conditions and things like that. So I think we still have some work to do. But I guess here it's really important also to stress the great value that we see from the European Union in making our life easier, at least in some points.
Yes.
That's super cool. I just worked on the Blue Card Directive, which is basically a talent visa, and we got a deal a week ago. So that should soon, which means in EU terms in 2 years, but it's transposed into national law, actually help to be a bit better. Things take a bit longer, but we're definitely working on it. Sorry, Andrew.
Oh, no, I was going to say, that's one of the things. So we're an Australian-German company, and so it's a slightly different perspective for us. But I guess that same theme is that quantum computing is too big for pretty much any single country. And that it's then one of the dilemmas, though, is a big shift towards national strategic interests, sovereign technology capabilities. And so there's this closing down and kind of instinct to clamp down on openness and ability to operate across borders, whilst also no one country can actually then do it. They'll just kill it, their domestic industry. So at that high level, the challenges are around visas, around getting the right people in, because it's a globally small talent pool. And there's other ones that we face, for example, as a company that's both Australian and European, our ability to operate within European level is then restricted because of that international ownership structure as well. And that's a red tape that's particular to us. but I think that general thing is that the resisting that temptation to clamp down and navigating that dilemma of security implications and strategic considerations.
It's interesting because in the industry committee, I regularly fight with Commissioner Breton, who's like the main guy from the European Commission responsible, because he always talks about European sovereignty and I talk about European competitiveness. And I think there's a huge difference because it will actually weaken your competitiveness if you constantly like close down and clamp down, as you said, rather than collaborating and establishing the right kind of talent visas and trying to make it open and fluid. Yeah. So I'm very happy that you say that. I think it's exactly the wrong way to go, but it is out there, this kind of term of sovereignty. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, conversely, that European competitiveness is exactly why we're then in both countries and going to Germany with an incredible talent base of quantum science, but also the precision manufacturing and advanced manufacturing capabilities to actually build quantum computers. And that's one where I think Germany has an amazing potential. There's a lack of quantum computing hardware companies compared to the level of potential it's got in every other kind of variable in how to build a strong quantum industry.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. So I'm wondering, so there is European like EU funding, but then countries open their own funds to support their local industry. Do you feel like it's a compensation for feeling like there's not enough common European funding, or do you feel like it's more incentivizing and maybe unhealthy competition between countries?
I think it would be great if everything would be aligned. So, for example, there is a European strategy in the State of the Union. They describe how they want to develop quantum technologies in Europe. And now the question is, why does each European member state now, in addition, create their own strategy? Why can't they just say, okay, this is how we support the European strategy and we will take care of these aspects, and then also the funding would be aligned. So I don't think we should be discussing whether the funding should be European or any, let's say, German or whatever friend, but we should discuss how can we create a situation where all the funding that we have is aligned towards a common goal.
I see approval.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's a general issue that somehow, many of the topics we deal with, like competitiveness and quantum computing, are bigger than any single country, as Andrew has rightly said. But somehow our decision-making structures are still stuck in a national view in many aspects, and that's something we have to overcome if we, especially as Europe, want to be more competitive. And that means aligning funding, that means aligning regulation and also work contracts, as I think, I don't know who said that, but across Finland and Germany, I mean, this is ridiculous. Yeah.
The paradox is we couldn't have come to Europe if there hadn't been that national funding, because the European funding locks us out. So national programs can fix a broken system at times too, is maybe part of it.
Yeah, that's the Breton, probably, or like the same spirit of thinking only Europe is Europe, I think it's short-sighted.
What would you say are the key differences in the support of startups in different countries in Europe? So Jan, you founded in Finland for a reason. Like what was this decision based on?
So we are a hardware company, and what we have in Finland is a great infrastructure to build it. So Andrew was mentioning also in Germany, you have it partly, but not so much for the superconducting technology that we are using. So it was mainly the foundry that we have, so a fab line, and then also their way of operating it. So we can use this fabrication line as a startup, and we pay the existing systems by hour, which is relatively cheap compared to buying such a system ourselves. So I think it's having the infrastructure and opening it up for startups, at least if you talk about hardware. And I think the key innovation in quantum still is on the hardware level. And I think this is something when we talk about national funding programs, also we should then think of, because for me, this is at least some of the tasks that the states should take, is build up the infrastructure and also the educational programs. So kind of build the foundation that then entrepreneurs can use and create commercialization tracks out of it.
Mm. And would you say the fact that Finland had the appropriate fabrication lines for your specific startup is a matter of chance, or is it a more general thing that they are more advanced in the build-up of the landscape there?
Well, Finland is a relatively small country, so they cannot, for example, like Germany, say, okay, we follow all technology approaches for quantum. And relatively early, they already in the 60s, they built up the superconducting technology. So in this sense, I would say it's more or less a coincidence. It could also have been, let's say, ion traps. We see that, for example, in Austria, we have very, very strong community on ion traps. And I think in this sense, a country at some point has to make strategic decisions and say, okay, now we kind of focus on this because we cannot do everything. And then I guess it's again the European Union who could say, okay, maybe in this place we focus on this technology, and in that place we focus on that technology, and all together it gives a coherent picture.
So we've talked about a European quantum strategy. What would you wish for in it? Like, what specifically would you like to be different? What would you like to have addressed?
I think a big part of it, which is exactly kind of continuing from Jan's point, is the fabrication, the communal fabrication tools. And that doesn't have to be, that could take a lot of forms, but one of arguably the biggest single blocker for developing then a quantum computing industry on the hardware front is that quantum computing has demands for manufacturing that are beyond those of existing semiconductor manufacturing chains and other kinds of manufacturing chains. And so the avenues available to other industries to stand up and go and have access outsourced manufacturing and have fabless design houses, like say for designing next generation Wi-Fi chips or ASIC design and things like that. Quantum computing doesn't really have that for a core part of its stack, that quantum layer. And that's then a really big blocker for developing, kind of taking that science innovation that honestly Europe has an absolutely amazing science base, but then being able to actually turn that into products and even prototypes. The tools, the fabrication tools are very restricted, and only a few university clean rooms tend to have those facilities, or if you're lucky, say in Finland, for example, they've got that foundry for superconducting qubits. But that's both the biggest blocker and also the thing that can establish the facts on the ground that then turn Europe or a region into then a global hub where that's where you go to make your stuff. That's where the industry then springs around versus investments in things like software or other stuff. Yes, those are really important, but it's also a much more fluid kind of thing. Those things can move away from Europe. If we've got foundries in Europe, those are there, they're fixed, and that creates then a hub and a center of mass that is a really sustainable and long-term value add for the ecosystem.
Yeah, I totally agree with Andrew. So I think there could be much more or much bigger focus on the commercialization. On the one hand, building infrastructure for building products. On the other hand, also on supportive structure. So I worked for several years in the photonics industry in the cluster management, and we worked on a lot of European projects, CSA, so coordination and support actions from the European Union, and they were focusing on scaling deep tech startups, supporting deep tech SMEs, and I think such calls could be very useful also in this early stage for quantum technologies. We also had a very interesting European project, Photonics for All, which want to increase the visibility and the awareness of photonics. So we have to do the same now for quantum technologies. And I think this could be also a very useful approach, and not only focusing on research and really large support activities.
Damian, I'm wondering, what is your experience in unifying innovation efforts in the EU?
I mean, I'm a young MEP, yeah, so my experience is quite limited, but I do take a lot of note actually of what you're saying. And so my question is a bit also, I mean, do you currently feel you have the open ear of the Commission or of parliamentarians at this point for these issues that you're talking about? Because I mean, if I look at this panel, there should be a European Commissioner on it, almost like to take up what you're saying. So I would be super happy to take some of these ideas with me. But I was just wondering, is there an open dialogue currently happening, or would you like to have more of a dialogue with the EU, if you like, the European Commission and Parliament, for the topics like CSE, as you just said? I mean, I think that's a very clear point. The focus on different countries building different kind of communal infrastructure, commercialization. I mean, these are all key elements of a future European quantum strategy. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of open ears.
You go, Jan. So, you probably had more. So from our side, we haven't had any contact with European Commission level. There's been some amount at some of the other EU levels, but not a vast amount. But I know IQM has been very vocal across Europe in helping really positively shape a lot of strategy.
Yeah, I think there's never enough interaction, let's say, with high-level politician makers to also help them understand. I mean, it's a very complex topic, and it has a strategic angle as well. So I think finding the right words so that everyone understands it at all levels of the hierarchy, I think is very important. There is currently forming something which is called the Quantum Industry Consortium, which is supposed to be the main kind of interface to the European Commission. But of course, this has the goal to unite all European quantum efforts. So in this sense, it's already a quite big thing. And then you don't really get the kind of direct connections, but it's more like an association. So I think, in a way, having focused discussions like this one, but sitting at a table in Brussels or whatever, somewhere else, I think this would be really important so that you can really openly also discuss some of the main topics in a very focused and direct way.
Maybe that's a good follow-up then that we can consider.
Yeah, I think there is a dialogue, but the most of them are driven by academia. So I think smaller tables with only focusing on startup needs, for example, or commercialization activities and so on would be very useful.
Maybe to pick up on a pet struggle of mine, and this is not a European thing, this is a global thing. Professors need to butt out a bit. They have a very positive role to play in this, but you'll notice the generation of people on this panel, none of us are the professor generation. The people that are going to turn quantum into an industry globally are then at a different stage of career. But I guess really critically, it's that the professors have a deep understanding of the science, but that is not sufficient to qualify them to really navigate this into a successful industry. And there's a really common theme that then a lot of these decisions are being shaped by input from professor level panels rather than from industry-led panels. And originally that was a challenge because there wasn't really any industry to consult with, but we haven't really caught up with the fact that there is now enough industry to really drive that and step away from academic-led, how are we going to shape the industry, and let it be led by the people that are actually going to do it.
The issue is that, I mean, Alexander just told us about his day, in the day, in the lab, in the evening, writing all these, things. And so, I mean, who has the time to be on panels? Yeah? It's probably the professors. But I think it's good. I really like this exchange, and maybe we can really see if we can build on a couple of very simple demands and try to understand who the right stakeholders would be. I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to poo-poo that they have an incredibly important role, right? I think there's still not enough industry voice in a lot of decisions. And I say this is not a European problem, but I see it everywhere globally.
Yeah.
That
the Quantum Internet Consortium can play a crucial role here to just collect the interest and talk to the persons in charge. I think it's not feasible to do this on a level of individuals, and I hope we will see more SME and startups coming in the future. So we have just to collect their needs in a consortium like the QBN, the Quick, and reach out to on a European level to just tell about our interests and problems. But I agree with Jan, to have a closer exchange is of course always desirable. And we're very open to this. I think on a national level we have a rather good exchange. It would be nice to have this also on a European level.
That's very interesting. So, I mean, we've established that the semiconductor fabrication industry is not sufficient for the hardware requirements of quantum technology in many regards. At the same time, the EU and Germany also specifically is very strong in precision manufacturing, in electronics, in optics, and so on. Do you feel like these industries are these SMEs are enough, or like strongly enough part of the quantum technology endeavor, that they receive the necessary funding and that they are involved enough?
And I think there's a great chance for them to participate. There's a lot of funding available right now. And I think that is something that will be triggered a lot by the market development, of course. So for an SME, an existing company, commercial traction is of course essential, and they will develop products and solutions according to the needs of the market, which is a huge benefit of these SME, of course. And I think it's important to have them participate now already at that early stage. And chances are good that happens now that there's significant funding available to do this in a collaborative effort. Yeah.
I think there's also a structural, let's say, challenge for this fabrication, that if you look at the classical semiconductor industry and you have chips manufactured for cars or whatever, and you sell them in very large quantities, this is not what's going to happen in quantum, at least not in the near term. So that we fabricate highly specialized chips with very, very low quantities. And this is actually not the business model for many of these companies which are already in there in the semiconductor business. So for them, actually, they would need to make huge investments buying these systems to fabricate them, but then these systems would be idle for 95% of their time or so. So this is usually not a business case at the moment yet. So I think it brings us back to this infrastructure discussion then. Okay, who else provides the infrastructure right now where maybe there's not yet a business case behind it? So I think this is the challenge that we have in kind of getting existing companies from the semiconductor side or so, for example, tapping into this field.
Yeah, building on that, for us, our goal is to make it very high volume, but the near term it's not, which is I think is the one there. We do need new instrumentation developed though. And that's one of the things that excites me a lot about the ecosystem that we're joining in Germany. And just, I guess, pointing to something that's been really successful for us is things like then in Germany, the Enabling Technologies program, which then provided funding to enable companies, classical manufacturing companies and quantum companies to work together and removed that risk, or greatly reduced the risk of engagement there by providing funding, so that there's still an opportunity cost of, we're sinking effort into this compared to something else, and, quantum's still early, but it allows people to engage in high risk, highly exploratory projects and bring together people that otherwise organizations that otherwise there's no strong existing interactions. Same, say, with, the software grants across Germany at the moment as well. Again, it's enabling us as a quantum computing company to reach really broadly around Germany and build links with a whole range of actors that otherwise we would have taken a very long time to build with or possibly not at all. So I do see then a lot of success in these kind of programs in providing funding for those kind of new consortia to develop targeted technology development projects there.
There was just a very, very good question from the chat. So quantum remains a rather academic topic over the next XY years, question mark. For how long do you think? So maybe I can give a quick intro also to this topic. I am part of the Planck consortium, where we are bringing together industry partners and academia to actually work on real life use cases that solve like real world problems in the near future. And also some of your companies here in the panel, you're working on devices that are more small scale, for example, and can kind of be used by anyone in the relatively near future. What is your opinion?
So I think before we go into the quantum computing part, I think it totally depends on the subfield of quantum technologies, because in quantum sensing, we are on another stage of the development and commercialization than on quantum computing and in communication. So I think there's a huge difference when it can be as a product on the market or still remain in research. So I think communication is one of the first possibilities to develop products and bring them on the market, as well as sensors. And this will be followed by computing.
Yeah, I agree, Johannes. And I guess whilst we're in that mindset of reframing the question a bit, I'd suggest there's still a lot of, the fact that we're all an industry panel here, there's a lot of then real commercial applications already, reasons to engage. And then whether it's to build quantum computers, whether it's to then get into the supply chain for quantum computing, whether it's to start getting ready to take advantage of quantum computing, then that it's not about waiting until the first application and the first person has plugged it in and done something amazing with it. Then the time is now to start engaging, and that you don't have to be, there's such a vast range of things, whether it's even just precision machining and electronics that we touched on. For us, we're targeting then devices with a few tens of qubits, so 50, 60 qubits in around 4 or 5 years' time, that are providing their quantum utility, so a computational advantage compared to similarly sized classical devices. So using it as an accelerator card there.
And maybe I'm bringing one other angle is, do we really want to kind of disconnect, or maybe that's too strong, but from the academia, because we're also talking about a shortage of talent. So I think it's very important that we still keep on working hand in hand if we really want to bring this field forward and make sure that we have enough people, because many quantum physicists, after their master or PhD degree, they don't stay in the field, but they go their own way in some other field. So I think it is important somehow to be also exciting for the academic field and support them if we don't want to create huge gaps there.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point. We have to bring industry and academia closer together. That's why we are here now. That's why we have the QBN, and that's why we have Planck and other initiatives. And the time, like I would say, if quantum technology affects your core business, the time to get involved is now, even if there's not an advantage now or tomorrow, but it's time to build the connections, to build up the skills and knowledge necessary. Good, we are running out of time. If there's a last question from the chat, I'm happy to forward it. Do you agree that we are at a stage in quantum like we have been in high performance computing in the, let's say, late 80s?
Yes, in many senses. So I think there's a huge number of learnings that we can have from the history of classical computing. Quantum computing, it's easy to fall in the trap because there's so much that's new about quantum computing, that all of the challenges that we're facing have never been faced before. There are so many things that we can look back and be like, wow, classical computing went through exactly the same thing, and this is how they solved it, or these are the different ways that they approached it. We look back at the 80s, and every different hardware provider had their own operating system, generally had their own manufacturing chain. Then Linux coming in and kind of, or Unix and creating this open source unified standardized operating systems. That was a big shift that we saw around then. We still have a diversity of different hardware approaches, and I think that's going to remain through at least the next decade, with many of them having viable niche areas and being able to have a range of challenges and exciting opportunities ahead. And also in terms of opportunity, so for people looking at entering into quantum computing as a career, think of it like if you could go and join Apple or Microsoft in the 1980s and get in at the ground floor of some really exciting stuff. The opportunities ahead, this is the ground floor of an industry that will grow and grow over the next decades, and you can really set yourself up for an amazing life ahead.
Perfect. Thanks for the finishing words. Sorry, we are unfortunately out of time here, but thanks a lot to all of you for this very insightful discussion. And we will be available in the Q&A room now after this panel. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.